let's go ahead and start. Courtney can, when he calls in, we'll just add him. This session here, special meeting. It's April 24th. This is a special call meeting for the purpose to support a small business community grant initiative that's to address the coronavirus pandemic, especially the retail and restaurant sectors, trying to help these businesses out. I think I don't know how many of you guys got to see the live Facebook feed or from town council, but they had a very good meeting last night. I thought it was, they brought up issues that I wasn't necessarily in agreement with, and they put them back down. And I think what they finally came up with, I thought was pretty good. But it was a very good discussion, and from my perspective, you know, our mission here is, as an EDA, is to attract, grow, and have retention of current businesses, and this certainly is in the latter category. It's something that we weren't really anticipating to do, but I don't think this is even normal times. Small businesses, when you start a small business, you're accepting a lot of risk. And under normal conditions, businesses come and go, and those risks sometimes overwhelm them, but these aren't normal conditions. These small businesses have been shut down due to a natural occurrence by our government for the most part, and at no fault of their own. So we're going to talk about something that we can do to hopefully help them get through this initial wave. I think, from my perspective, and everybody's got their, and I'm just going to say, the recommendations that were laid out last night, and which are in front of us today, the town council, I think we should try to adhere to those as closely as possible. And there's really two reasons. One, they are the elected body, and they're elected by the citizenry to make the fundamental decisions on something like this. Plus, they are providing half of the income, the funding for this. The other half is coming from the EDA budget. But with that said, we, you know, I think there are some criteria, at least from my perspective. I'd like to have this thing be a somewhat of cut and dry criteria. I don't want Mary coming up and saying, well, this business has this and this and this. What do you think? I want it to be a very cut and dry, yes, no, up, down, to where when she comes to us, we have 99% of the time we don't have to make a judgment call. And the reason for that is I really don't want to get into picking winners, or being the perception of picking winners or losers. Who gets this, and who doesn't get it, based on possible friendships or something like that. So this is a small town, so I want it to be pretty cut and dry, and we'll go from there. I think today, as we talk about this, any unintended oversights by town council, I think bring them up, and we'll address those. Certainly, Ted, we want you to tell us if we're getting into some type of liability issue. Please speak up, and we'll try to address those. And finally, I just don't want this to become a very complicated process to where we over burden our staff, Mary and Ted. I don't think that's the problem. I don't think we have that problem yet. But we got to keep it simple, because we don't really have a big staff here. So what I'd like to do, I think, before we really get into this, we'll have a roll call. John Owen?
Here.
Dave Cincinnati?
Present.
John Butchram's here. Kevin Turner? Here. We're all here. We have a quorum. Probably should have done that initially. But Bart, is there anything you'd like to say before we start going over this?
Not particularly. We're just here to express, of course, Mayor Rush is also there.
Right. So with that said, I'll just start stepping through this document, and we'll discuss each and every little part of it, and then we'll go to the next part. Any comments, please tell us. We'll see if we can agree to this whole thing. The purpose is to support the small business community that has been significantly impacted by the coronavirus epidemic, especially the retail and restaurant sectors. So this is again going to be limited to retail and restaurant. Now, retail is defined in my mind as any business that sells a product to the public, either wholesale or retail. For instance, maybe Southern Flavoring, they sell directly online, but they also sell wholesale to other businesses. They are a retail business, correct? Is that?
Not open to the public for retail sales, but I don't think you can go over to their shop and get something off the shelf.
But
You
can
can.
order from
But you
online.
can online,
You,
yes.
no, you can go in the front door and buy something.
We can?
Okay.
Great.
Okay. So,
You can,
Yes, you
Yes.
can.
I could say you can go in the front door.
John said, yes, you can go in the front.
as opposed to, let's say, a automobile repair shop where they only sell, let's say they don't sell parts, they only sell a service. So if you're selling man hours, then you're not a retail business. But if you sell tires at that automobile repair shop, that's a product, so that's a retail business. Even though they do both, they sell a service and products. Are there any other questions related to what is a retail business?
I have a question that it seems to be very narrow. There are a lot of businesses that don't sell products. You mentioned an auto repair shop, but there are people that in town that may do only state inspections, and I understand state inspections are taboo at this point. So if that's the only or a big portion of someone's business, then that business is suffering just as much as anybody else is.
Yeah, this was talked last night at the town council meeting, and Mayor Rush may interject if he likes. Right now, our funding is $150,000. It originally started out quite a bit more than that, and the intent was to pull back, limit the scope of this first phase to retail and restaurants to see what the response would be. The next possible phase would be going to the professional service sector, and which would be what you're talking about. People that are companies, because we have obviously, we have dentists, we have lawyers, we have people that do all kinds of services, accountants, all kinds of people that are hurting right now. It's not just
That's true.
So that was clearly laid out and discussed in great detail last night at the town council meeting. And what they're suggesting for us to do is to look at this as kind of the phase one, to do the retail and restaurants, because it's the most obvious, and then move on to a phase two if it looks like it's a popular program. If we, maybe if we only have 2 respondents, we still will do that. But that was that's why we see that. There was a great discussion about that, and they wanted to limit it because they're afraid. We have 200 business licenses out there, and maybe one of the reasons is you could overwhelm this program too. So, but anyway, this is what they want to do. They want to limit it to the retail and restaurant. That doesn't mean we have to agree to that, but I'm telling you that's what the reasoning for that was. You want to say anything along those lines, Steve?
I think, Jonathan, you have it pretty accurate. The caveat here, though, is if we start changing a lot, then we got to start all over again. You
Yes.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Time is kind of the essence with this program. But restaurants, because they're suffering, they do have takeout. We have stores downtown that are closed because of the order, and because nobody's out. And they've got mortgages and rents due, and we need to keep these, we want to have them open their doors back up when it's over with. If they get too far behind, they won't be opening their doors. That's that in a nutshell. We talked about what John mentioned about service industry, and that's, again, probably the second round if this thing continues. And we don't want to overwhelm Mary.
Well, it could be, that's all well and good, but I think it could be too late if we put off. I don't understand if these businesses are worthy at any level, whether it's phase 1, 2, or 3, I think they ought to be included personally, but I can't change the document, obviously, but I'm disappointed that we're narrowing it down. There are businesses out there that are suffering. They're in bad shape. They can't work or they have reduced hours. They laid people off. They are still paying health insurance for some of these people. It's an expense for those businesses. I'm sorry, but I don't know that this is, and I know I can't do anything about it but express my displeasure that we're not expanding the scope of this. I mean, it's, we got other people that are in business that are going to be left out of this. I don't have any, I think it's a great program. I appreciate it, but I think the scope is too narrow.
Yeah, I'm worried too about the definition of retail. I mean, I think, and I agree with John. I'm not on Facebook. I did not see the meeting last night, and that's on me. But my understanding was it was not going to be limited in scope like this. And I think, someone who's an insurance agent, that's a service, I suppose, even though they're selling an insurance product. Obviously, we have a lot of those in town. Now that business, it seems to me like if you're going to have a threshold, which we do in here, that requires a 25% drop in sales, that would be the criteria, because everybody still needs insurance, and maybe those businesses are doing very well. I don't know. And if so, that's great, and they wouldn't then be able to show a 25% drop. But I kind of agree with John and his thoughts, but my inclination is to go forward with it. I think the businesses that we're helping here clearly need it too, but I would encourage additional, I think we should all have additional discussions on these other businesses. And I worry about, and my other thought that goes back to the definition of retail is making sure when this gets rolled out, we're very clear on that. Because my concern is you're going to have all these businesses saying, why, wait a second, do I fall into this? If there's a gray area, we're going to get, it really could turn some people off. So, I mean, my thought is I do think it's great. I'm glad we're doing something. I'm appreciative of town council for doing this, and I think we should go forward with it. Absolutely. But I think we need to be very clear in the rollout and what we're telling people this is for. So we don't have backlash. And I would also...
I don't want to be looking like we're picking and choosing. Picking winners and losers. So.
Yeah. Because there are going to be some service industry businesses out there come back and say, well, my sales have dropped 50%. I've laid off 2 people. So I hope we continue to talk. Maybe that won't be the case. I don't know. Maybe we're... But I just want to express my desire to take a look at other sectors too. But anyway, I mean, and we'll walk through all the other provisions.
I think
I do
we
want to
should
go
walk through
forward
it and come to a final agreement. See how many things like that are.
Well, I agree also, but if we are going to do the retail, this part, maybe the next funding could be non-retail to give everybody a shot at getting, because at the next round, if you do both, then of course you may not help as many as...
That's the intent. The phase 2 would not be retail or restaurants. It would be everybody else. I think, I don't know why exactly, other than trying to maybe not knowing what the response is going to be. I think that was kind of the intent of town council, was to limit the scope of this to kind of just to address, to get a feel for how much support we're going to get for this thing. But I would say maybe we put in a provision that that we act on phase 2 under certain conditions sooner than later. Maybe make that suggestion.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's not all up to us. I don't know what town council discussed as to that. I'd be leery about putting out some statement that this is phase 1 and then phase 2 not happening.
Right.
Unless, unless there's definitely going to be a phase 2, I think we need to be careful
I
about.
agree with that too.
But, I think it does make sense to, and immediacy is an issue, and it does make sense to look at restaurants and retail because they were specifically excluded as not permitted by the state to be open, whereas the other businesses are allowed to be open.
Yeah.
To the extent they can still do
Except for the dentists. There's exceptions always. There's always exceptions.
Right. So, anyway.
Hairdressers and dentists are the ones, I guess, for the service sector that are getting hit really, really hard. And doctors too. But, so anyway, I guess that's something we'll come back and at the very end of the thing and talk a little bit more about. The other criteria is, let's see, well, there's a bunch of other criteria. But non-franchise, so we don't want the Dollar Generals necessarily that have potential support from their parent company. So it's really focused at small business, primarily locally owned businesses, or locally owned, all locally owned, for profit. And I guess the other thing is brick and mortar is another thing that we need to make sure everybody understands. Brick and mortar, obviously, that you own or rent a building where you pay utilities, I think, is to that building would be the way that I guess I would define it. And the exception to that would be like in the little antique mall back here where somebody rents a room in the back. They are retail, but they only rent a room of maybe there's 5 or 6 tenants in there, I don't know. Are they excluded or are they allowed to do this too? Because they pay rent along with 3 other tenants in that building. So that's, I'm not sure. What did town council, I didn't come in early on that part of the discussion, so I don't know if y'all addressed that.
That would probably apply, and it really didn't come up, Jonathan, but the owner of the building collects the rents. So that person then, I guess, is the property owner.
Okay.
Because that's sublets throughout. So probably the owner of the building would apply, but not, I can't see each and every food applying. Yeah.
Then
I mean, we're limited.
I know, but then you got.
But they all do have a separate business license. They all
Yeah.
have a separate business license.
I mean, can you imagine if there's 100 booths in there, where we could go with this?
But can the owner of the building get it just because he's renting space?
This discussion did not come up. This is a discussion that probably needs to be clarified because the owner of the building is renting spaces to, he's subletting.
Right.
But if you're talking about retail, specifically retail and the restaurants, that building owner is not doing anything
Yeah.
other than renting his building.
He has an obligation to somebody. Or his rents are not being paid because nobody's working. I mean, we hadn't got down in the weeds that tight.
Well,
Wouldn't just trying to think this through, like, let's say somebody who did have a booth applied for it. I mean, they don't just get $5,000. They'd have to show what, so their rents are going to be what? I don't know what they rent those booths for. It's not going to be $1,000 a month, I wouldn't think. So I would think that they would fall into a category where maybe they are eligible, but the amount that they're eligible for, they're not paying electricity, they're not paying utilities, their inventory is non-perishable. Marketing, I guess, would be a component.
rent.
Compensation and rent would be low. Now, compensation could be high, so you're right. I mean, you could have.
Well, I think
that
that's,
came up. I wouldn't argue that it really is not appropriate, but that's
Yeah,
y'all.
yeah.
I mean, this is the same argument if we were to go to phase two, would come up with the hair salons, because they have individual haircutters rent chairs on a monthly basis. And do they not get anything, and you just give it to the person who owns the business? My thought was to reduce the amount significantly, but still let those guys get something. You know, I mean, if they have a retail business, although they don't own the building, they're a sublet. The problem with this, the previous, is if you let the owner of that building, who is not a retail business, apply and get $5,000, then I know personally at least one person who owns 2 or 3 buildings downtown, but all he does is manage property. And he's going to be applying on behalf of every one of his buildings, even though he doesn't sell anything. So we can't.
And thinking out loud, those people in those booths are independent contractors, and we flat excluded independent contractors.
Well,
But
I mean,
they're not really contractors, they're renters
And they're paying income taxes
on their income.
on their income.
they pay, but they pay sales tax too. I mean, if you want to limit, independent contractors doesn't necessarily mean one person, although that's what everybody thinks. I'm a one-person company, but I'm a C Corp. And I consider myself a company, not
Yeah.
but I don't sell, I'm not retail, but I'm just,
Well, an independent contractor to me is somebody that works for someone else but is not employed. They actually don't get a paycheck from that employer, so they would be an independent of that, but they're providing a service. I wouldn't consider a shop owner that's renting space in a building an independent contractor. I would say that they're an independent shop owner.
Well, they're buying a business license for their shop, but the owner of the building renting out spaces would not need a business license to do that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's right.
And maybe this is jumping ahead, but I think it kind of relates to this discussion as to how this is going to work. When they put in the application, are they going to request a certain amount, and then
no, right now it's set at $5,000.
so you put it in, you just have to attest, certify,
Yeah,
or
if you
whatever
show
that
documentation.
this 5,000 will be used for.
You sign, I think they have a signature, maybe even notarized or something on it. It's kind of the owner. There's kind of an honor system to a certain degree, although you do have to sign, and you provide a lot of bills that show that you this, that, and the other, and you pay utilities, and you have a certain amount of loss compared to either last year or the last 3 months average. That this last 30 days, there's 2 different ways of doing this, maybe 3. We can talk about that in a minute. I don't have any problem with that. Again, it's just defining and trying to think of the things that are the
That's right.
exceptions. And because we're going to be hit with these things, and it'd be nice to define them up front. Because I know that just because you don't rent the whole building, you only rent the basement, or you rent the upstairs or whatever, but you still have people coming up there, like the alpaca store in the back. He's a retail business, but he only rents the back part of that business. He doesn't qualify because, I don't know if he pays the utilities or not. But So it gets a little tricky.
And it looks like the way it's set up is they do a certification up front that this is how they're going to use it, but then there's nothing on the back end. There's no kind of audit or accounting on the back end.
Yeah, we don't know.
You can't create too much. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it.
So, I mean, if you could put in there possibly that if you are a sublet to a bigger complex and you provide utility bills, independent utility bills for your section of that building, then you will be treated as a small building. That if you are a sublet and you only pay rent, but you don't pay any utilities, or something like that, where you come in, you're going to get a grant, but it's going to be for a couple $1,000, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just keeps coming back to the definition of retail. If we define retail specifically and roll it out that way, then that will determine whether the the person who has the booth. You know, because to me, that's retail. I mean, they're the one that's actually selling that product. And then the question becomes, if they're not paying utilities, then they can't ask for money to pay utilities. If they're paying rent, they can get that. So it would come down to how much they would be, you know, if we're just, they would have to certify maybe that if they're gonna take 5,000, it will be used only for these purposes, and to the extent it's not, they're gonna be required to refund it, to at least give some mechanism. I don't wanna give somebody with a booth $5,000 that makes $5,000 in a whole year, and then have some other business who run out of money and some other.
Well, that's what I say, but
business.
your scenario is gonna require a lot of
Yeah, I
audit
get
type
it.
action, which
Yeah.
we don't have the resources to do. That's why I would just make an assumption that their overhead is a lot less up front. Provide them a much smaller grant than the person who provides us with utility, you know, the electric utility, they're paying everything up front.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to, I mean, they're gonna have to certify under oath, I imagine, or however it's put together. It looks like it's an affidavit that they'll only use it for those purposes, and in doing so, they have to understand that they're swearing that they do need it for those purposes. So I guess that takes care of it, yeah.
So if you want, okay, so what you're saying is, instead of making any special exceptions, you just say they have to show that they pay electric bill, water bill.
Well, no, I'm not saying an audit where they have to show it.
No,
I'm
I mean
saying
up front.
The certification will be that I need this, that this money will only be used for.
So, but if they have rent, but they don't pay electric bill for their space, does that mean they're not qualified?
No, then they qualify to use it, they just have to use it for rent.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they couldn't, you know.
But this will only be for the ones that buy a business license in the town of Bedford.
Yeah, you see, and that's why we narrowed it down. It's over 200 or 300 business licenses. And
Right.
A lot of in-home businesses. And I think the concept was, and then you brought up good points. But I give an example of needful things.
Yep.
He owns that building, he's paying the electric bill, he does rent booths. He would be eligible, but not the subtenants. The idea is for him to keep his door open.
Well, let me ask you a
But
question.
we're not talking about what y'all are speaking of, and it has not come up. Right, Mary?
Well, if that person that you're talking about that rents the spaces, that owns a building and rents the spaces, and that's all he does, is he required to have a business license?
Yes.
The two
Is-
businesses that do that do have business licenses as that is their operation.
Okay.
Is running that business.
All right,
And those-
is that business license a retail or a restaurant?
Retail.
No? Not in what we did define retail a moment ago, it is not.
More of a property.
Y'all defined it.
Well,
Well, retail is,
I guess we can define anything we want.
That individual rents it to retail businesses.
that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I rent my space to my firm. I wouldn't, well, my firm's service anyway, so it doesn't. But even if my firm was retail, I wouldn't think I would be allowed as just the owner of the business, because I'm not doing retail.
But your
Not a separate
business,
LLC.
your business is the one that's dealing with the public and is making a sale and is, the only thing, the building owner, the only thing they're doing is providing a building and maybe utilities.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they're going to get paid because if their tenant applies and gets it, that's going to go to the rent.
But if that tenant is suffering because of the situation, that tenant is gone.
Yeah.
So you're penalizing the one that's providing the money to buy the rent.
I agree with you. I think that's right.
Those two businesses that we're mentioning here that actually sublease booths to others, the owners are the ones you see when you walk in the store. That is their business, is to bring together those booth operators.
Yeah, and some of that stuff
So
is
that
theirs
is their
too,
business.
right? So they are in
They're the
retail.
ones running the shop.
Yeah.
On behalf of their
Yeah.
tenants, their renters.
But the renters are more retail than that person that may be the gatekeeper and is telling people where to go to, and he may be collecting the money for those shop owners too, because a lot of those shop owners could be absentee.
Yeah, the business is collecting the funds, and some of those owners may even have spaces in their own building, I don't know, but their business is running those shops. that have booths.
Well, the definition of a retail business, retail refers to the activity of selling goods or services directly to consumers or end users. Some retailers may sell to business customers, and such sales are termed non-retail activity. Different jurisdictions can set different parameters for the ratio of consumer to business sales. So, I mean, I guess,
So retail is more of a consumer term.
yeah.
I don't have a problem if the store owner sells rents little booths in the back of their store, and they're out front selling, they have a retail business license, although they are renting, they're also renting to supplement. I don't have a big problem with that, because a lot of those rented spaces aren't occupied by anybody. They just come in there and they put all their stuff up, and the person up front's it's
Mhm.
trying to sell it all. And I think that's a very legitimate, it falls right into what we're talking about here. Those, I just don't want to get in a situation where we have property managers submitting an application for a building that they rent to a restaurant. So then we got an application for the restaurant and the property manager. Because if we don't be careful, we'll get into that trap. And we'll be turning them down, but because we'll say they're not retail, unless they have a retail business license.
Mhm.
I used this example last night, and remember, it says brick and mortar. Define brick and mortar, to me, that's a building, not booths in a building. There are property managers, and I manage 5 downtown, that are brick and mortar buildings. I'm not gonna come out, I'm not gonna ask for this, the tenant will ask for this because they're running the business.
Yeah, that's what I see it too.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I thought we just said the tenant couldn't do it.
No, that's, no.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, I'm on that page, yeah.
I'm on
I mean,
that
that's
page,
how
yeah,
I'm
that's
doing
not
it
what
too,
I-
because the tenant's then gonna pay the rent to the property owner, so the property owner gets taken care of, the
Yeah.
tenant gets taken
So
care
the
of.
tenant is the name of the
Okay.
company that's on your lease.
Yeah.
Those little sub-renters aren't on your lease.
Right.
You just
Okay,
have
yeah, I'm on
permission
board
to
with
do
that.
Okay, okay.
And if the
Yeah.
tenant doesn't pay the rent after several months, what do you gotta do?
Yeah, no, yeah, it goes to the tenant. No, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, I'm with you on that,
Yeah.
yeah.
We delete it.
That's not what I heard before. I'm glad
Yeah,
it's clarified.
okay,
so.
all right, we're good.
So any business that has a lease with the building owner, not with the sublease, but a direct lease with the building owner is considered a brick and mortar. Does that make sense?
If they have a business license.
Yeah, well, they're selling
Yeah,
out of a
business
brick and
license.
mortar place.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
We're not dealing with sublease people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do all the booths have to have a business license also?
Who?
I think they
The
do.
booths? I think so.
each one of them do within those.
You know, too, based on Kevin's definition of retail, we probably want to be careful that we're talking about retail goods versus services when we announce this. Because somebody will look that up and say, retail means service, right?
Yes. I mean, there was some discussion last night about looking at the sales tax records, but I guess if you only pay sales tax on goods, right? You don't pay sales tax on
Right.
Yeah,
services.
there you go, okay. So if anything comes up, we could always revert to that, I'm saying we do.
Right.
if we can.
So I think it's,
All right, makes sense.
Okay.
right now, the funding is at $150,000. The EDA will be responsible for half of that. $75,000 will be coming out of our budget. We don't have a problem right now with coming up with that money. What that does mean, though, is the $75,000, they're projecting that we will get a reduced amount this coming year, which instead of 125, roughly, it'll be at 75, and they're going to advance, town council is going to advance us 38, half of that, I guess, 38.5. Is that right? Is that what it was, 30, 35?
Yeah, y'all
37.
125 to 30, and
Right.
I'm sure we've got at least 75 we've collected this year.
So-
So if it's more than 75 or 37, whatever.
It'd be 37.
Yeah.
37.5, which will be advanced to us, and then there'll still be another possible 37 roughly that we'd get at the end of the year. Typically, we get the full balance at the end of the year. If we go phase 2, if that ever even develops, then we would probably lose, that would also go towards it. So we would basically have to rethink anything that we have, big ticket items that I may come up with. You know, I may always come up with the big ones, and have to be considering that we won't have any income possibly for this year. And potentially have another 75,000. If phase two comes up, another $75,000 would be coming out of our long-term investment budget. So, right now, it's only 150, but if it goes up to 300, then we're looking at $150,000 less on our balance sheet. And again, you know, that's disappointing, but it's not unreasonable, considering if we can keep most of these businesses in town, then it's worth every penny of it. So, right now, the maximum grant is $5,000. I assume that's the grant amount instead of maximum. It is a $5,000 grant. So I would suggest we just strike maximum and put 5,000 in that place. The length of time in business, it's a 6-month, and in a lot of places, if you look at some of the other data from the other localities, a lot of localities require 1 year in business, and that we're only doing 6 months. That's why when you document your loss, they have at least 2, maybe 3. One way is to look at last February, compare it, 25% decrease from last year, you're good. Another way is for the shorter term businesses, you average January, February, March, you get the average income for those 3 months, compare that to January, February, maybe December, January, February, whatever, then you compare it to last month and see if there's a 25% decrease from the average, whichever they can do. I don't have a problem with that either. So 25% reduction.
So, Jonathan, excuse me, just,
Yes.
you're talking about including December and January in the calculation?
Let's see what they actually said. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but 90-day average of sales for months before March 15th. So you go back 90 days prior to March 15th. You put together your total sales, divide it by 3, and then you compare, I guess, from March 15th to April 15th. And if it's 25% decrease, then you're eligible.
So where are you looking?
On this second side of the first page, at the top.
The 90 days, 90. Well, I mean, you know, the coronavirus didn't even, the first recorded case was December 27th or something like that in the United States. I don't know when it was in Virginia and Bedford, but if you go back to that 90 days prior to, then the sales are probably going to be the same.
Well, I guess we got shut down around the 15th of March. Is that when the governor put his stay-home order? So everything was effectively normal up until March 15th, I think. And then so you go back 3 months prior to that, and you take the. And this is for the short-term businesses. Some businesses should look. They really should look a year prior. Right?
Yeah, so the way I understand that is they're gonna show that they had $100 a month in those 3 preceding months, but this month they only had 74,
Okay.
so
Right.
therefore they qualify. So that provides the baseline, not,
Okay,
they're not anticipating,
that's the
John, that they're gonna be able to show
baseline.
the loss of
Okay.
those 3 months
Okay.
now as compared to the.
I'm with you.
And it's all related to income. I'm going to get into profit because profit can be manipulated.
Yeah.
You can overpay your staff easily and make your profit up 0.
So the 90 days, and then we're going to take what's from
Yeah, then
that.
what are they
90
doing
days is
now?
going to be the baseline, and
Right.
then we're going to, okay.
And then compare that to the last month. So it has to be somewhat simple.
Yeah.
You don't let Mary have it pull out her
Okay.
calculator. So that's how you address the 6-month companies. So I think we're bending over backwards to let people that have only been in business for 6 months. That's good. Town council is, I think that's good. Okay. Eligibility, you have to be within town limits. That's very obvious. For businesses 10 employees or fewer, so we're trying to target
Well, that actually came out last night. That was part of the discussion, so I put it in that draft last night, but then forgot to take it out today before you got it. They did not define it as 10. They didn't put a limit, there's no limit on the number of employees
Oh, okay,
to define the small.
okay.
So no limit on employees, that's good.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Eliminated.
Okay, the funding time, so I guess this, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by funding time, other than the program just ends at July 1st, but the application actually cuts off wherever it is, May 15th.
May 15th.
May 15th, so I guess by the, I mean, you guys will be burning checks as soon as we get the next day, right? As soon as we give the authority. It does give us time to to make sure we can get a quorum together, because I'm hoping these will be pretty short. If it's cut and dry, it's like Mary comes, here's a list of companies that qualify, and we just approve it. It's that, we're not going through the loan committee. This is not something we're going to put on you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. It's not a loan, so it doesn't apply.
John,
Just,
the reason we didn't change it, we kept it July 1, is in case we do phase 2, we don't have to do all this over.
I like it.
one of the things that I was glad to see, and wanted to make sure was in here, was the when funds are depleted statement, because I don't want people thinking, hey, I know I'm 26% loss, and on time, I'm gonna get $5,000. You know, I think we also might want to put first come, first serve until funds are depleted. That would really take the onus off our back on somebody complaining, well, you know, I feel like I wasn't treated fairly well. We have, Mary can keep track of which applications come in first, and you just clearly say, we got yours too late. Does that seem reasonable? Or is that unreasonable?
I think it's reasonable, but that's for your discussion, because what we'll be bringing to you after the closure at 5 p.m. on May 15th, we'll bring all of the applications in some format to you, and I will keep them in order of receipt with time, date stamps on it for that. And so if you do reach a point where you end the funds, that's one way to capture that.
I would prefer to do that. I don't want to make a decision between
Yeah, that's
two businesses. If you could keep track of that. So the use of the funds, and I'm not sure how this is put on the application, but I think there's a statement in there on how we expect the funds to be used. We're not asking for proof that they did, just kind of an honor statement or a legal affidavit type. Rent or mortgage payments before March, April, May, June, or July. Utilities, March, April, May, June, or July. Inventory, and this is a big thing. This was even on national news of how some of the restaurants are going to have emptied their inventory of their refrigerators. How are they going to get money to restock? And that's a big concern on a national level. And this certainly can be used for that. Marketing, obviously, that's fine. Compensation, any costs associated with rehiring or hiring new employees, but we aren't using this for payroll, because there's already a program, national program for payroll assistance. The only thing that you could add on there that I've seen in at least one other place was they wanted to give the businesses the option to work on their online presence for online retail, in case there's another phase 2 that comes through, for instance. Companies that are retail, if they use this money to establish an online presence, could actually stay in business a lot easier, because they're doing internet sales at this point, because they use that money for that application. So I think I'd like to see that put on there.
It's captured under number 4, marketing. That
Put that under
was
marketing,
added
or
to implement the online presence, to encourage the restaurants to do carry out retailers to sell in California.
right, yeah.
And we've got one that's done that. They've transformed Instagram into, they're reaching a greater market now than just
The
Bedford.
little boutique over here, they have a big online presence, I think.
Yeah, they started with that.
Yeah, So that would kind of actually make me feel like this is an investment, actually, more than just a bailout. It has some investment potential too. So if you want to put that on there, unless there's some objections with that.
No, I agree. Like Mary said, it's on number 4. It says to implement online sales practices.
No. All right. Okay. Good. All right, process. Applications will be accepted up until 5 PM on May 15th. An application includes filling out this form and submitting all required attachments below. Business will need to provide the following documents: proof of 25% loss in sales. All claims of loss must be certified with a sworn affidavit. Following are methods you can choose to prove loss: profit and loss statement for February, March, and April. 90-day average of sales for months before March 15th, which we've already discussed. Previous year sales for the months preceding March. I think there's a little bit of, we're not using shalls and stuff like that in this. I think Mary has a little flexibility as long as they provide some documentation that is acceptable. Also, a copy of the 2020 town business license. Documentation explaining the intended use of funds. Please provide a copy of bills to be reimbursed for the 4 months defined above.
So that second sentence actually comes out based on council's direction last night to use the phrasing documentation explaining the intended use of funds. We'll strike that next sentence because they will be certifying that they will be using those funds for the purposes of those items under uses.
That's the affidavit.
Yes, sir, the affidavit. That's what I just handed to EDA members. Ted's just drafted an affidavit that would go with this, and it would be sworn before a notary. And we have to work out the mechanics of how to do that for that.
Okay.
Can we go back, Jonathan, can we go back
Yep.
to the process on page 1? We're talking about, we say that applications would be accepted until 5 PM on May 15th. Well, if we still have money and we're saying that we're going to cut it off as of July the 1st, or when funds are depleted, but we've cut off applications, that to me is not in keeping with what we're trying to do as far as give away the money. If we were out of money on May 15th, then I could see that, but we're not actually cutting off the program until July the 1st.
Well, I think there was, go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Steve. I see you and I think the same.
Well, I think they wanted to, I don't want to talk for town council. They just wanted to get this thing up and running and get to a stopping point where we then make an assessment on how the interest of the public on this program, or whether we have obviously and then reassess to go into open up phase 2, or if we only get 3 applications in by the 15th of May, then I'm not sure what the next action would be. Maybe open it up to the service sector. But I assume you guys just wanted to put some reasonable short term so you can make an assessment at some point.
Well, there's a couple of thoughts behind that. One of the reasons we thought of this was the SBA money just went away like that. And a lot of these small businesses just couldn't get it. We were going to help with the government. We wanted to see what the demand is May 15th. I mean, folks have got to pay their bills. They'll be 2 months, 3 months behind the time we get this money, or whatever it may be. So we wanted to see the activity in that amount of time. We're talking 30 businesses. We may not get 15. I don't know. But after the 15th, we kept it going to July 1st in case we need to do a second phase. We don't have to go through all this again. It's kind of been made available. We may have to change the parameters on who we're going to give it to. Is the only thing we don't have service. So that's the 2 different dates. The 15th is for this restaurants and retail. She'll have a week to prepare these applications for y'all to have a call meeting. We'll see how successful it is. If it's not successful, why do we continue to do it? I think it will be very successful. But it gives us time to set up and do the next phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we need to have a cutoff like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. And to John's point, I think the analysis would be if we get 40 from retail and restaurants, then maybe we want to consider, opening up that application period longer for them or whatever. But
Yeah, well, we obviously don't say until $150,000 is completed. We, at the 15th, if we.
yeah,
if
we have a cutoff and we can,
We can go back to town council and say, hey, we need more money.
Based on our numbers, we're right at the threshold on the American restaurants and retail. I think we looked at it.
Yes, to date, for business licenses for restaurants, there's 24, and for retail businesses, 25. But I think there's some restaurants and retails that may not be up to date on their business licenses.
So that's half of it. I don't know that we'll have to.
And the SBA funds and Paycheck Protection Programs should be going live again today after the president signs what was passed by Congress to put those funds back in place.
I don't have a problem with, what is the 24th? That gives them 3 weeks roughly. I think and it's up to us to really hit the road, put out a press release, maybe make a Facebook and out, whatever, you can call, I don't know, whatever you do to get this on, hit the streets as much as we can.
So the application's already out there in Google. For those who have a Google account, they can just log in and it'll turn it in, date stamp it and everything like that. For those who need to do hard copy, we will need to roll that out. I can send it out by email to all the businesses that I've been keeping in the loop on these. Well, I can hit all of those 24 and 25 with active business licenses. Monday, we're scheduled to do a video recording of me basically describing the program to potential applicants. Yeah.
I think
we're ready to roll. I'm already getting calls about it.
Yeah, I think
what people
businesses have a
say.
certain amount of responsibility to, 3 weeks is certainly enough time, I think.
And if they've already done it for the SBA, their paycheck protection, they're ready. So
But
Are they going to be eligible if they receive any of that?
they would be. That clause was taken out by council as it was originally drafted. So for those who got the emergency impact disaster loan, EIDL, they would be eligible now for this.
It will.
They will. They took the clause out from the original draft of that.
Okay, all right.
So, is that okay, John?
Yeah.
Just leave it like that.
That's fine. I guess what I'm hearing is, once we get to May 15th, then we're going to have a decision to make whether we're going to continue on
Right.
or whatever. Okay,
I think that's the legitimate.
I'm with you.
Town council, us and town council. These businesses, back to number 4, we require a W-9 form, so they will have to, at the end of the year, claim this as income. Tax it. Looking at the form, you require the applicant name, which is the business owner, business name, address, town limits, within the town limits. It has to be a physical address, not a PO box, obviously. Phone number, email. Was the business open as of August 1st? Is that 6 months old? Okay. All right. Number of employees.
We can strike that now that there won't be a 10-employee limit. Unless you just want to know for tracking purposes, it's just informational.
So required attachments, proof of 25% loss in sales. All claims of loss must be certified with a sworn affidavit submitted with this application. Copy of active business license, documentation explaining intended use, which will also be above that signature, I guess, all part of that. Signed W-9 form. Certification of loss and affidavit that the funds will be used, for the purposes signed, stated to keep the business open, signature. So there it is right there. So, I think we're close.
Does the town have a notary?
We have 2.
Okay. Because they're hard to find these days, or notaries that are willing to just do.
We have 3 days.
Okay.
Great. We're covered, just whether they're here, we'll make sure, but the building being closed, we'll have to time out. That's why I said we have to figure out the mechanics of how the affidavit
Yeah.
and certification times out with the notary. They can have someone else, another notary
Right.
do it. Doesn't just have to be us.
So it seems we might have to add a couple asterisks at least, right? We need to make sure that the definition of retail is clearly, it's not, because what we heard was it could be
If we're not going
goods
to
or
use that
services.
definition, if we're not going to use the definition Kevin read, then we need to define it ourselves.
Well, even that definition said in certain localities, the ratio changes and it's defined differently, so.
But that's what we haven't done that, though.
No, we haven't done that. That's what I'm
So
saying.
we need
Maybe
to-
when you
yeah.
say retail, we put an asterisk
Yes.
or in parentheses, businesses that sell goods.
Sale
to-
of goods,
Goods to the general public. or-
excludes service only.
Yeah, sells goods.
Maybe Ted could help us out with that.
Yeah,
I was
don't put
looking at our
services.
definition from section 54 of town code for retail and retailer defines how that's transaction happens. I'm sorry, I had it up here and I lost it. But we do define it in another section of town code if we wanted to be consistent. I didn't find it defined in the zoning ordinance, but
Yeah, if it's defined and that
54.
definition comports with what we've been discussing, that'd be,
Right.
section 54-328 is definition of retail.
We just refer to that, then,
Yep. And it doesn't,
That's what I use.
Okay.
okay. And that doesn't,
If you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go catch the governor's conference on his
2 o'clock.
one to move forward, but please carry on.
thank you, Bart.
so is that definition consistent with what we're
Yeah.
talking about?
That's what I'm trying to pull right back up here.
Read that out
If you
loud.
wanna
That would be great.
talk about something else and give me a minute to actually get my phone to work.
What was the other, you'd said a couple asterisks. Was there something else?
Well, that and if you want to address, because I know it's going to come up, brick and mortar. In other words, we were talking about if the business owner is not a sublet.
Well, we said that was okay.
I understood what.
No,
was-
no, wait a minute. You said the business owner,
You can lease directly from the owner and you're fine, but if you sublease from the person leasing from the owner, then you're a sublet. Does that make sense?
It does,
I
but
thought
it-
okay, I don't
I
know,
don't
maybe
know.
we didn't, maybe I was clear on it.
yeah, I don't,
We're talking, let's go back to the antique store, where the person the one business rents the whole building, and so that person is gonna get the full grant. But he decides to supplement his income and to get his inventory up, the apparent inventory, he subleases 3 rooms to 3 different individuals in the back. But they don't sign a lease with the owner of the building. They have an arrangement, whatever that is. It's non-bricks and mortar. They rent from the original owner who, because like what Steve says, he rents his buildings to a business. That business is, at that point, a brick and mortar business. What he does beyond that, as far as subleasing the basement of that business to to somebody else that may be retail, is that going to be, I mean, that's what we were, I thought that's what.
I thought we clarified
Well,
that.
but from a practical perspective, does the person who just sublets the room, do they actually have a business license? I would think that they're just operating off of the main person's business license, so they're not going to satisfy that portion.
I don't know.
Well, if they have a business license, they ought to be eligible.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what the relationship is with the owner.
That's kind of where I come down to. If they, no, I mean, is that not the intent? If
That's
they
what
have
I
a
thought,
business
that's what I
license
thought
and
we
they're
decided
retail,
on when we,
No, I was confused.
Yeah, because it says they have to have a current business license, so if they
Yeah.
had one, they would be eligible.
that's what I'm thinking. It doesn't matter whether they're renting from the owner or sub-renting. If they have a business license and are legal to do business in Bedford, then
Mary, I'm looking at this. We need to say in this purpose, define what we're funding, restaurant and brick and mortar businesses, retail, brick and mortar retail, but I'm not seeing it here.
Up in the funding paragraph. Then it's to, second grade, we added the phrase, "the owners of" was added. Locally owned, non-franchise, for-profit, brick-and-mortar, restaurant, and retail businesses.
Where are you now?
First page, you got purpose, then you have funding.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's
Locally owned, non-franchise, for-profit. In brick and mortar, I think that's just identifying the fact that they're actually in a building. They're not
Selling at a
out of the
physical
back of the
location.
car or
Yeah.
something.
Not a food truck.
Yeah.
Not a transient type.
Right.
Well, I think that takes
Yeah.
care of it, because, I mean, if they can show a business license and these other things,
sure.
then,
Yeah.
then they're gonna
That's right.
qualify.
I agree. I think the relationship with the owner of the building is.
Because then you get, yeah, I mean, not to get off on a tangent, but then you get into different corporate structures that people may set up to.
Yeah. And if we were doing phase two.
Imagine
get to
that,
salon-
right?
Yeah.
to salons, does each chair have a business license?
Yes.
They do.
They are independent contractors.
Yes.
So for clarification, if someone is a booth within a larger business, and they have a business license, they can apply for the $5,000. Is that, or is that a no?
When you did a count, Mary, of 24 or 25 retail business licenses, did those include the booths?
Not that I'm aware of, but that might be a better question for Kathy. The names I'm seeing in here are actually the big businesses.
And how was that was that just sort of by knowledge of, we know what they do, or was there some kind of, how was that designated? When you went through and highlighted the,
That was me recognizing the names.
Okay.
Yeah, I went through this several times. So first I called out chain or
Right.
national or anything that could have been a franchise under a corporate
Right.
structure, took those out. And then took out personal services, or actually isolated them in case those became part of a discussion about who that does affect. Individual chair owners were included in that as individual business licenses. It's just, it was me looking through it. So Kathy may know more about what one of the tenants may be within one of the two antique retailers. Kathy, I don't know if you want to weigh in on your recollection of this.
but this one, that did include the independent.
It should have.
Okay.
Now, whether or not I
Right,
put
to
them
the
into
best
that
of your-
count,
yeah, I
yes.
got you.
That, they did not come into that count, because I wouldn't have known John Smith
Right.
was in. I actually also went by addressing. So
And
if I saw something on Longwood or College Avenue, home occupation.
Right.
Right.
And so, and that's the same information that town council had last night.
It was here.
Yeah,
We didn't get into the details of what businesses were in or out.
okay.
But to talk about the booths that we're talking about, a hairdresser, for example, that person does not sell
That's a service.
goods. It's a service.
Yeah, well, that's if we were
If
to
we
do
do a
phase
second
two.
round, yeah.
That doesn't apply to this current discussion, but the little antique guy that has, a whole room full of stuff that they buy and they come in twice a week and restock it, and the person out front, that person doesn't have the overhead as the person who actually pays the utility bills. So, do we require utility bills? So, I mean, that is one of the requirements. So if you don't pay utility bills, does that mean you're not
No,
eligible for this?
That's not a requirement.
Not a requirement, it's
says
just
the use of
it's
the
You can use the
it's a
funds.
It's an allowed
Funds can be used for.
use.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not objecting to
Yeah.
that person getting assistance.
Well,
Certainly. They just aren't as obligated financially, they don't have the overhead as the other person.
And that's what I kind of come back to, if there was something in there that said they're certifying that these funds will only be used for these permitted purposes for the next X amount of months, you're going to carve out the people who are only paying $50 rent and
Yeah.
not utilities. They're not going to get $5,000 and say, well, I can pay my $50 booth rent for the next, do the math, however many months that works out to be.
So do we really obligate, I mean, if we find out that somebody applies for that, but they don't have the bills to substantiate 5,000, do we have are we going to reduce the amount from 5,000?
I don't think that was what they were planning.
That's
Yeah, I
not-
think it's
that's not-
$5,000 per request.
Mhm.
I mean, there's going to be some people that make out a lot better than other people. Some people don't have the
Oh,
overhead,
yeah.
they're gonna get this big chunk of money and they're gonna be like, wow, this is great. And some people are, oh, just barely paid last 2 months rent. And, you know, it's gonna set up just like all these programs always do this when you're giving out.
It's not gonna be perfect.
It's not gonna be perfect, there's gonna be people that are gonna love it, and some people are gonna think, well, I wish I was in that person's.
So there are going to be some of those service people that are going to be hurting just as bad. That's all.
Well, I agree, I was kind of
That's-
disappointed to see,
That's not for me to make that decision, obviously. We can't change this document. I guess we can,
well, I mean,
define it, how we're
theoretically,
gonna-
We could, I don't know, town council have they already approved this document?
Yes.
Okay, so any substantial changes would require them to reconvene.
Yes.
And actually, looking at this, it does say rental mortgage payments for March, April, May, June, or July, so it limits it to 5 months. So they would have to come in and say, I have the ability, I have enough expenses in just these months and in permitted uses. So that will cut out somebody from really hitting the jackpot on it, because they do have a time limitation. So
So you have
I think
inventory, so you could purchase inventory.
yeah. Pay
needed
your
to
rent.
restart. I mean, that does give us, I think what that gives us is the ability to, if there should be somebody trying to unfairly take advantage of it, we could question them, well, is this inventory really to restart? Are you, is your rent significant enough that you need this to cover? So I think it's protected. I think by the criteria that are in here and by the limitations on time for use and by the certification and affidavit that that's all they're going to use it for, it really does the best that we can in these circumstances, make it fair. So I agree with it.
So are we saying that a booth rental person in an antique mall can or cannot, just to be clarified?
They can.
I think if
Well,
they
but
can
he may not
if
be
they
able
can,
to accept-
if they meet these criteria, and that's where we'd have to look at each individual case.
Now,
Do
do we
they
want
meet
to
that?
change it to up to 5,000? Because if he comes in and he only has $500 worth of rent over 5 months,
Well, this says maximum. Maximum
That's what I'm
means
saying.
that's
Y'all,
most.
I believe you struck the word maximum.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, I think you just did. You just-
Because their intent
Well, we
is
can
to
put it
give
back in.
5,000.
Oh, I say we leave it
every-
back in, yeah. I say we leave it in, and then it's a maximum grant.
It gives us the discretion that if
Yeah.
you do have a booth owner that's meets all the criteria, but they don't have the expenses, we could authorize less.
Yeah, because you all voted on maximum, right? The maximum language was in what you approved. Yeah, I think we should
I
leave
think
it.
would defeat each purpose if we do that.
Well,
But you want us to vote on what you approved, and you approved it with
Yeah,
maximum.
and obviously we didn't catch that, but.
Yeah.
I'm saying that-
Oh, I think the intent's still going to be that people
Yeah.
are going to qualify for maximum.
we're just trying to give us.
Abuse.
wiggle
I think
room
it
in case
gives-
We have some of this, there's gonna be people who sneak in, potentially come in between the cracks that meet all the criteria, but that don't have a big restaurant refrigerator full of food that they have to buy, or,
Yeah.
they just have a couple of desks that they wanna put in their corner of their room or something, so it gives us a little flexibility.
That question did not come up,
Right.
but we were making big picture.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And everybody's mindful of the fact that we're all trying to take quick action and do, put together something.
And as I said last
Quickly.
night, we're like Cheers, everybody knows your name. If somebody abuses it, I think they regret it.
It's a good thing.
So leave maximum back in, I'm sorry, I didn't know it.
All right, I got to write that back in now.
Unscratched.
All right, so I think we're square pretty much with this document.
What did you find out about the
Definition
retail?
of
Do you
retail.
fi-
Yes.
So Town Code 54
What is the definition?
Town Code 54-328 says retailer and retail merchant means any person or merchant who sells goods, wares, and merchandise for use or consumption by the purchaser or for any purpose other than resale by the purchaser, but does not include sales at wholesale to institutional, commercial, and industrial users.
So it's goods, it leaves services out, so you could refer to that
Yeah, I
as
think
the
that-
criteria,
Right, that's what we're going to do.
and that would, you could just refer to that section.
Ted, are you comfortable referring to a section in the town code, or is that just how we would define it if somebody raises a challenge?
you hear that, Ted? Question from Dave Sensenig about
No,
your level of comfort with using a reference to town code to define retail?
well, I think that's fine. I think that's a good way to describe it.
Okay. Any other concerns, comments, questions, discussions?
Of course, any changes y'all make, that becomes the plan. I guess the town doesn't have to fund it if they don't like what the EDA's plan is gonna be, but it sounds like it's almost identical.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I don't think
we've really changed anything significant.
no, I think we just defined it.
So,
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the grant program as,
So with
go ahead, Ted, I'm sorry, did I jump the gun?
the change,
I'm sorry?
Approve the program with the changes
Mary, can you
noted.
tell us exactly what changes we made?
Sure, we can recap.
Yep.
We kept the purposes the same, funding is the same. You kept maximum grant at 5,000. Criteria for eligibility is the same with the removal of the employee limit. We changed the lengths to say funding length instead of funding time, back to the original. Process is the same. 6 months in business. You're going to define retail as referenced in the code elsewhere. You were fine with the proof of 25% loss in sales with different methods to give flexibility. Kept it at retail and restaurants, not professional services at this time. And brick and mortar means on the ground and not transient. And the amount of the grant would still be 5. The certification up front, that, and that those who are subleasers or booths within a different business that has a business license can apply if they have a business license. And you agree with the certification with an affidavit, sworn affidavit with a notary.
Back on the first page, it says ends July 1st or when funds are depleted, first come, first serve, or something like that.
Okay. Let's clarify that.
But I'm just a little unsure of the process here. If we put in language like that, does it then have to go back to town council?
Yeah.
See, I think, Mary, some of what you just read is accurate in what was discussed, but I think that was just part of the discussion.
Right.
I think what I would make a motion to approve is the grant program as approved by town council last night, which is stated on this 3-page document. The only changes that were noted today were changes that you guys actually took out last night but didn't make it, which would be number 4 under criteria, and under required information, the second sentence under 3. And then lastly, a requirement under the application to identify the number of employees. And if we take those out of this document, then my understanding is this document then reflects what town council approved last night.
I don't think it would be a problem on the definition.
With the added definition.
Okay,
in the document.
so that's what, I think, that's what I moved to approve. I moved to approve the grant program as approved by town council last night, adding the definition of retail under town code 54-328.
Your second.
I'll second that.
And noting that definition doesn't change anything that town council did last night.
Right.
Not a substantive change.
Well, let's do a roll call vote. Kevin?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jonathan Buckstrom, aye. All approve. This has been approved. So, I think that pretty much is everything we were going to do today.
Did you want to talk mechanics of how you want this presented to you? Because, so they'll close on the 15th, the applications. And so staff, that will be a week after your meeting on May 8th. So we probably either move your meeting from the 8th to maybe the 22nd. 'Cause
Can we
wanna
just move our 8th
be quick
meeting?
in the turnaround about this, so.
Yeah, can we move our meeting to the week after?
Ted, is that any mechanics they need to,
Yeah,
is that fine?
sure, you can call meeting anytime you want.
Well, I just don't see having
Or
two
you
meetings.
provide notice.
I mean, we don't have any other pressing issues at this point, so let's just move our 8th meeting.
So Jonathan's talking about moving the meeting from the 8th to do that since there's no pressing business for that meeting.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
We'll call it with the proper notice to the public.
Obviously, we have to give the notice just like we normally would. That's fine.
Okay,
So it's going to be the 22nd.
22nd. I'm supposed to be on a cruise that week.
Good luck.
Have fun.
What does that give you, Mary? That just gives you a week?
Yes.
I guess they'll be coming in.
That's my hope, is that these will be coming in as soon as they hit, for the first come clause, the people are gonna wanna be in the queue to receive it. So I'll go ahead and start compiling those, and they'll be ready to go with that last ones we receive on the 15th.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, thanks everybody for showing up. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you.